I want to hone in first on the super speeders that she addressed in the State of the State book. This is legislation that you carry, and obviously she's looking for the book that's described the pilot program in New York City. What do you want that to look like? Why is this something that you've championed?
So this is a really important issue because right now there is no mechanism in city, state, or local law to remove recidivist, reckless drivers from the roadway in any meaningful way. 75% of drivers who have a suspended license still drive anyway. So that tool is just wholly ineffective to keep reckless drivers off of our streets. What this bill would do is require the worst of the worst drivers to have a speed limiting device installed on their car by court order or by judicial order, just like we order someone to put an ignition lock in their car when they're caught DUI. Same exact concept. I was really happy to see the governor call for this to be a pilot program in her State of the State book. I have not seen the language of her proposal yet. I think this is a simplistic idea, but it has a lot of moving parts to it. And so until I see the language and exactly what she's proposing as it relates to New York City, I'm going to withhold judgment in terms of saying yay or nay yet. But I'm really happy to see the governor take this step, advance this conversation, and I'll do everything I can to work with her and my colleagues to make this a reality, because the reality is, and the truth is, too many people are getting injured and killed on our streets because of these worst of the worst drivers for whom no other mechanism in law seems to be working to curb their speeding behavior.
Your motivation, is it more of the pedestrian death, or is it more of just accidents in general and tight quarters, especially in the city?
It's the injuries, it's the fatalities. 20% of the serious injuries and fatalities are caused by the worst 1% of drivers in New York City, for example, right? So if you can solve that problem, if you can make the streets 20% safer, it's hundreds fewer injuries and dozens fewer people who are dying needlessly because of someone else's reckless actions behind the wheel. And this issue is personal for me. My grandmother lost her 12-year-old daughter to a car crash way before I was even a thought. But the loss that was suffered in my family carries through generation after generation after generation. And so I think we owe it to everyone who's been a victim of traffic violence, whether you were hit and you were injured, or you lost a loved one, or even if it was a near miss. And how many of those have we all experienced? We can do a lot more to keep our streets safe from people who don't seem to care what the rules of the road are.
Gavin Newsom in California vetoed a similar measure that was passed by both of their chambers recently. He said this should be regulated federally. Why do you think the state should have a role in New York, I guess, when it comes to something like this?
Because states set traffic laws, right? States set ignition lock laws. States set speed limits. They set licensing requirements to get a license, right? That is how all of the states operate. And so it's wholly within our jurisdiction, and I would say our responsibility to keep our streets safe under our laws. It'd be great if the federal government wants to encourage this technology like they have in so many other ways. But we don't have to rely on Washington, which can barely get its act together to legislate at all, to wait to get approval and permission from them to keep kids and families and seniors and pedestrians of all ages safe on the local streets in Brooklyn or Buffalo or Brentwood or Albany or anywhere else in the state.
A question that I've seen come up about this, in your version of it, I'll say, because obviously, as you mentioned, we don't know the language the governor has just yet, but in an emergency situation, and someone needs to go faster, is there a provision for that?
There's an emergency override function that, depending on the judicial order requiring the installation of the device, you would be granted a certain number of emergency overrides, per day, per week, per month, etc. It gives you like a 3-second, 5-second boost, to get that extra bit of speed. But I want to be very clear here. We're talking about the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst drivers, right? The worst 1%, worst 2% across the city, across the state. You already have demonstrated a complete reckless disregard for obeying traffic laws in the normal course of getting around, right? You're someone whom speed limits are not even suggestions. They're just quaint numbers on a sign, right? And so you have a higher responsibility to put yourself in a situation where you're driving safely for everyone's safety, rather than to allow us to continue to allow you to speed at will under the guise of, oh, it's an emergency. Oh, I had to do this. Oh, I have to do that. you know what? Don't take the highway if you've demonstrated that you can't drive safely on the highway.
Is there a protocol for someone that's facing this penalty or has this on their vehicle? What if they have a rental car or they borrow someone else's car?
So just like in the ignition lock context, the order attaches to the individual. And if you get caught DUI, you, the individual driver, have a legal responsibility that any car you drive and that you are found behind the wheel of has to have the ignition lock installed on it. Same thing would apply here. Any vehicle you drive would have to have the speed limiting device attached to it. If you are caught by a police officer or by any law enforcement driving a vehicle without the speed limiting device that you are court ordered to have, you would face a misdemeanor charge just like you do in the ignition lock DUI context. We are mirroring the same exact protocols and procedures and context in both.
So if I borrowed someone's car that had this, it would be the same kind of deal. Is that what you're saying? Same kind of thing as the ignition lock?
If you were required because of your extremely reckless driving behavior to drive with this installed on it, any vehicle you drive would have to be installed with this device for you to avoid any type of misdemeanor liability.
And just so we get some more clarity about the device itself, what does it do?
So it's actually quite remarkable. I encourage you to come try it out with us. We're happy to do a test drive with you. I think it makes for great television. It uses GPS technology to know exactly where the car is and what the local speed limit on that roadway is. And it changes your ability to accelerate past the posted speed limit by using GPS. So for example, if you're driving on a local street in Brooklyn, where I am right now, speed limit's 25 miles an hour. The court order would say you cannot exceed the speed limit, or you could exceed the speed limit +5 or +3, so 27 miles or 28 miles or 30 miles, etc. You could floor the gas pedal and not go faster than that preset limit. But if I'm now trying to get onto the highway for the BQE, the speed limit on the highway is 50 miles an hour, it'll automatically accelerate me up to that speed limit so that I cannot go faster than what the court order requires of me. And then if I come off the highway, it'll automatically decelerate me. So there's no guessing involved. It uses phenomenal technology. This is very commonplace in many parts of Europe. In fact, in the UK, they are mandating that all new vehicles sold will include this technology. And you might even see cars or trucks on the highway now in New York. I've seen them driving up the thruway to come to Albany. I'll see a delivery truck that says, car cannot exceed posted speed limit by monitoring, right? So this is already commonplace. We also think it's the safe, smart thing to do for the worst of the worst.
And it is, you believe it's reliable because what if for some reason there's an error in the GPS or the speed limit change, you know what I mean? That there could be some other factors there.
And all the studying we've done, all the tests we've seen, all the data we've seen, this technology is incredibly reliable. I have test driven it now multiple times, have not had an issue whatsoever. And so I think this is a smart, good idea to help keep people safe on our streets.
Okay, let's get to two more the governor included in her State of the State. Stop Online Predators. Can you explain a little bit more about what that entails?
So the Stop Online Predators Act is a comprehensive set of rules around keeping kids safe on the internet, right? 2 years ago, when we passed the Stop Addictive Feeds Exploitation Act around addictive algorithms, the number one thing I heard from parents was, this is great, my kids are addicted to social media. Does this include Roblox? Does this include Fortnite? And I had to say, what's Roblox? I didn't play Roblox growing up. It's a newer phenomenon. I said, no, it doesn't, right? Because that's not a social media platform, but it's still a platform where kids are spending hours and hours and hours of their time every single day. And the privacy protections on these platforms are horrendous. So much so that an adult stranger can message a minor user without being connected to them, without knowing them personally. They can look at their profile, they can look at their location, right? And when 40% of the users on a platform like Roblox are under the age of 13, they should not be subjected to unwanted or unsolicited messages from adults, right? This is a problem. Last year alone, Roblox reported more than 13,000 cases of child exploitation on their platform. One expert has called the site an X-rated pedophile hellscape. I know very few websites or platforms that get that type of label. This is serious. So The Stop Online Predators Act would put in place privacy protections so that adults could not send messages unsolicited to kids. Kids would have their profiles set to private by default. Parents could approve friend requests for kids under the age of 13, as well as give parents approval over financial transactions, because oftentimes these adult strangers will send kids money on the platforms like Robux, for example, in the hopes of grooming them to exploit them. We want to put a stop to that type of behavior.
This might seem simple in a question, but how do you prevent an adult from manipulating all of that? And pretend, and I know we've seen it before of saying they are, checking a box that they are under 13 or what have you. I guess, how do you work around that, and does this address that?
So the age verification technology goes beyond just self-attestation. This is not a case of like, oh, I put my own birthday in, I'm gonna lie by a couple of years to go make myself older or make myself younger. The requirements would require, just like we did for the addictive algorithms bill 2 years ago, commercially reasonable forms of age verification that do not rely on self-attestation. It's gonna be up to the platforms to decide what works best for them. They can, by the way, most of these companies already know how old you are based on your usage patterns. Like, they know more about us than we ever fully realize. They have a pretty good sense how old all these users are, but there's a variety of ways that they can go about verifying someone's age to keep kids safe on these platforms.